Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the IET Central London network in what is our last event before breaking for summer. And what a year this has been. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we were forced to suspend our activities at Savoy Place and swap for online lectures instead. But today we take a step closer to normality by having both myself and our speaker for tonight at the same physical space here at Merseytravel's headquarters in Liverpool. Of course, maintaining our distance and with me wearing a mask since one of us has not been fully vaccinated yet. And I'll let you guess who that is. We're hopeful that from September onwards, we will be able to hold hybrid events where we will mix local presence at Savoy Place with online access, or at least we hope, but we will keep you up to date. So, our speaker for tonight is David Powell, the Program Director of Merseytravel for the rolling stock upgrade. David is a true engineer and, well, most and foremost, I would say. He has studied mechanical engineering in Imperial College, and then he proceeded to complete an engineering business management master's course at the University of Warwick. And evidence of his soft spot for engineering is that he has insisted he reviews a number of technical submissions for the Liverpool's rolling stock program himself. Professionally, David has held various positions of responsibility in rolling stock projects and programs, both in the UK and abroad, such as Metrolink in Manchester, Nottingham Express Transit, Victoria Line, the Dubai Metro, Porto Metro, Merseytram, and Edinburgh Tram, just to name but a few. In tonight's lecture, we will give you an insight of the new fleet, the class 777, as we call it, due to be put into service here in Liverpool on a program run by Merseytravel, which is Liverpool's combined authority transport arm. And this is as part of the Devolution Power. I won't talk a lot about it, as I had the privilege, and I still have the privilege of working on this program for the last 4 years. And I would be biased, of course. The new fleet will transform the traveling experience for the customers here, the customers of Merseyrail, and the new trains will bring a range of customer-focused improvements, including, amongst others, an improved saloon environment and industry-leading accessibility, which is both quite important for David and the team. And there's a difference between Merseytravel and Merseyrail, but I will let David explain this.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Dimitris, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to explain to you all what we're up to here in one of the further flung suburbs of London, maybe, or maybe London's a further flung suburb of Liverpool, who knows. Right, I've given this is very much an engineering-led project. But also there's a big political dimension to it. We're one of the original passenger transport executives that were set up in 1968, and we were the pioneers of devolved management of rail operations in the post-privatisation era. So railway was originally privatised back in '94. And at the beginning of the next decade, actually took place in 2003, the Department for Transport devolved responsibility for the delivery of the service to us here as the PTE. We were the first to take that step in the UK. Subsequently, similar steps have been taken by Transport for London, so there might be some of our colleagues from Transport for London on the call, in which case hello, and the result of that was the creation of the London Overground Network, which a huge change to that part of the national rail system, and subsequently we've had similar steps taken in Scotland, which went with the devolution of the creation of the government up in Edinburgh, and similarly in Wales, where Transport for Wales have come onto the party a little bit after the rest of us, but now they have direct control of their railway. So it's created a very different environment to undertake a project of this nature. Really interesting, and I'll try and bring out for you, as well as some of the technical aspects, just how some of the decision making that we've been through is quite different to the way in which most conventional rolling stock replacement programs have taken place on the privatised railway. And of course, we all know the industry is going through a huge change at the moment. The role that Network Rail have it looks as though it's increasing very significantly. And who knows where it's going to take us. So I hope that what we've been doing here acts as an interesting reference point for other people within the industry. So without further ado, let me crack into the presentation.
Sure, David.
Okay, a little bit about the background. I recognise that some of you might know our railway, but probably quite a lot of you don't. So the network, we are technically somewhat different to, well, we are very different to all our surrounding railways. Most of the network up in the northwest of England is diesel. So we have diesel multiple units running around here, there and everywhere. But we are DC. So in the UK, we've got basically the railway south of the River Thames, the route heading up to Watford, and then a bit of a gap, and then you reach our network. And we're a sort of enclave of third rail technology up here in the northwest of England, which is very, very interesting. Our style of operation, we're much more akin to a metro. Quite a few people around the city actually refer to the railway as the metro. We're not a metro in the sense that something like Tyne and Wear Metro is, or you could argue that the Underground or Docklands and other systems that you have down in the capital are. We are part of the mainline network. Network Rail own and operate the infrastructure that our operator Merseyrail runs over. But the style of operation very much is much more akin to most of the metros that I've worked on in various places around the world. Characteristic of it is our route length, and we're just over 70 miles long, and we've got just under 70 stations on the network. So we're stop and start all the way. The only other operator I think who's comparable to us in the country in terms of frequency of stations is the Overground again, where we do have quite a lot of parallels with our friends down in London. We also have, courtesy of my predecessors who remodeled the railway in the 1970s, we've got an extensive section of underground running. We've always had tunnels that run under the River Mersey, which is actually just outside the window here. We're looking at it from the 10th floor of our building. So we've had tunnels there, but a loop was created. So the lines that run under the Mersey from the Wirral run in a loop where 4 city centre stations are connected up, and then they go back out to the Wirral. And then similarly, our north-south lines, these are the blue lines on the map, which are here. Again, there's a tunnel section that connects the 2 stations under the city centre. So it's not on the same scale as the Underground, for example, but compared to most other most of the regional cities around the UK, we're well served in that our railway actually gets right through the city centre, and roughly 10% of our network runs through our network of tunnels. Our fleet, good old war horses, I have to say. They're sound rolling stock, but they were built at the tail end of the 1970s by British Rail. They were built at York Works. This graph here, I quite like this one because, unsurprisingly, we're the bit that sticks out like a sore thumb at the over end. This is age of fleets and different operators. This is actually now a bit long in the tooth. I've just realised I need to change this. This is a few years out of date because I pointed out all the other operators with relatively old fleets like Great Western, East Coast, Northern, Greater Anglia. Not only has that rolling stock been purchased, for most of those operators, it's been introduced. In the case of some of them, it's recently been unintroduced, I'm afraid, but for the grace of God go we. So we do, by actually quite some margin, if you look at the aggregate life of trains for all the operators across the country, we are by far and away the oldest fleet of trains.
And yet still operating, I would say.
And yet we still are operating well. So I mentioned the devolved management, and through the presentation, I'll touch on some of the changes that has enabled us to introduce the network. But another feature, when we firmly believe here that devolution of the management of the railway has been a boon for our network and a boon for our city. It's worth noting we're not on the same scale in terms of rail usage as London. You've got way more railway per capita down in the capital than any other city in the country. But of all the other English cities, we have very significantly a higher proportion of people who use our rail network. Glasgow is similar to us. But if you look at the Manchesters, the Leeds, the Sheffields, and the Birminghams, and the Newcastles of the world, they have their own distinct characteristics and strengths. But ours is the fact that we have a very heavily used railway, which penetrates our city, serves us very well. But since the devolution, when we were known by the rather unfortunate title of Merseyrail, we've lost that tag, which is great. The only person who ever mentions that anymore is me, in saying that we've lost it. And we now routinely are the most punctual operator in the country. And if we're not the most punctual, there's a bit of an inquest goes on into why not. So even though we've got rolling stock that's well over 40 years old, it's relatively reliable. It's fairly simple, straightforward old stock. We operate it well, or our operator operates it well. And also we perform generally very, very well. Quite often we end up in first place on Transport Focus's passenger satisfaction surveys, which are undertaken every 6 months. Not always the case, but quite often we are first. And again, if we're not first, we want to know why not, and we want to get back to being in first place. So generally, we consider that we're quite a high-performing network company. A little bit of background to our railway. Okay, so we've got something pretty good. We want to make it better. And the background was we've got a very old fleet of trains, and at some point it's going to start deteriorating. We're running out of other fleets that we can cannibalise spare parts from, because all of the sister fleets that go with the 507, 508s, generally we've nicked bits off those. We are genuinely running out of places to go. So what's the overarching characteristics of the programme that I'm running? Well, the first one is we're investing around about £500 million. So it's not the biggest programme of works in the rail industry by a long way, but it's a decent sized one, and it's the biggest one that's been undertaken in this city since the 1970s, when the underground network was created here. It goes by the name of the Loop. The Loop and Link are the name given to our tunnel network, and our current fleet was introduced onto the network after that infrastructure was built. Safety features very, very heavily in what we're doing. In particular, we had a fatal accident on our railway back in 2011, which made the national headlines. A young lady went down the gap between a train and a platform at the station just over the road from where Dimitris and I are sitting, James Street. It hit the national news because the guard who dispatched the train ended up getting prosecuted for manslaughter and was jailed for 3 years. So hit the national headlines. I don't know if any of you remember that. It's certainly well known in this city. So addressing the safety implications of our railway has been right at the top of our agenda, working with the ORR and working with the RAIB report that went into that accident. It's been probably one of the biggest defining characteristics of what we're up to. It's one of the things that started to shape reasons why we might want to do things a little bit differently to the norm in the industry. It meant that we got thinking about different approaches to solving some of the problems that our railway faces. And let's not forget, we're an old railway. A lot of our infrastructure was built in the middle of the 19th century. I know the same is true of much of the railway network that you live with down in London, but we've got lots of old infrastructure here as well. Okay, if you're going to build a new railway, well, why don't we build a good one? So I started looking at some of the experience I've had in other parts of the world, most notably out in the Far East, on building metros. The railway looks and feels like a metro in many ways, and I've looked to introduce metro-style performance into not only the way that we operate, but also the technical characteristics of the railway. More about that, but we are looking to deliver journey time improvements in excess of 10% across the network, which for a network like ours, where you stop and start all the time, that's quite something. None of that is to do with line speed. It's all to do with acceleration and braking characteristics of the train. Right, this is an interesting one. Passenger demand and passenger capacity. Well, when we wrote the business case, so this is going back, I joined in 2012, and that was my first job, is work out what on earth we want and write a business case that means we can justify the investment. We'd had a very healthy long-term, we'd had at least a decade of passenger growth. Liverpool probably performed strongest of England's cities through the aftermath of the financial crash that we had at the end of the noughties. I guess that's maybe one of the benefits of not having quite as many banks up in the city. But anyway, we actually continued to grow our economy well, and the city has been performing economically pretty well. God knows what COVID's going to mean for all of us, but I guess that will play itself out over the next few years. But we were living in an environment where we were solving the right sort of problem, which is looking at consistent, strong 2 to 3% passenger growth. And I know that to some extent that mirrors the national picture, where we've seen the number of passengers nationally travelling on the rail network more than double over the course of the last 20 years or so. Obviously, it's all a little bit uncertain, but we have a real benefit here. Our railway isn't just a commuter railway. It is heavily used during the peaks, during the weekday peaks, and a lot of people do use it as a commuter railway. But actually, we have a very strong leisure market here, and the busiest day for our railway actually is Saturday. We carry more passengers on a Saturday than we do typically than any other day, which is people moving around the city for leisure and entertainment and shopping and such like. That's also a much less peaky demand, so it's a good one to manage. What has manifested itself actually in the aftermath of COVID is that when restrictions have allowed passengers to start flowing back, we've recovered really quite quickly because we've got that strong leisure market. So that's been really interesting to watch, and I know it's quite different to quite a lot of other operators in other parts of the country. So if you're going to buy a train, well, let's buy one with improved passenger facilities. We put a lot of effort into this. Rather than talk about it, I'll show you some of what we've actually done. But we've specified and ordered and now designed a train around what our passengers' needs were. And one of the things that meant, I remember I was asked in my interview, what do I think is needed on a Merseyrail train? And I bet you all the people asking me the question had a great big long list of features of rolling stock that they wanted me. Now, how many of these is he going to do? And they probably had a bingo card and something like that ready. And I thought, I put my heart in my mouth and I said, I don't know. But I know quite a lot about rolling stock because I've been doing it for 20 odd years at that point, 30 odd years now. And I said, but part of the job is to find out. And getting into researching what passengers actually want. The previous fleet that I'd introduced in the UK was the Manchester Metrolink trams. I worked at Transport for Greater Manchester for thick end of 6 years and introduced that fleet. And I just said, I can't come here, having just introduced a fleet of trams in Manchester, and assume that what's right for tram commuters in Manchester is similar to what we need here in Liverpool. That would be completely wrong. So I don't know what they made of that, but they offered me the job, so I guess it wasn't a completely wrong answer, even though I think it scored 0 on the bingo card. Right, so we'll come to that in a few slides. Another thing, our network is defined by the third rail, and that's a real limitation. Strategically, we want to reach out further. We were aware that there was no huge appetite within the industry for expansion of third rail, and that view I think tightened up over the course of us writing our business case. But we thought about how could we go beyond the third rail, even if we're not allowed to actually build any more third rail. Very, very interesting. I'm actually going through tomorrow. I've got to present to my board our case for our first genuine example where we might be making a real world decision of how we do that. Unfortunately, I don't get the opportunity to brief you before I brief my board. If we'd done this maybe a day later, I might be able to tell you what the recommendation and hopefully the acceptance is. But anyway, we've been working on that. There are ways in which our new trains can operate beyond third rail, dual voltage, or we've been exploring the opportunity for battery powered trains as well. Accessibility. We had the safety report, we had an accident, we've got big gaps between trains and platforms, or we did have, at quite a lot of locations. I don't think we're radically different to most other parts of the mainline network in that regard. But I've built several of the tramways around the UK, and tramways are extremely good at delivering a really tight platform train interface. And in many ways, they're dealing with a very different equation to what we deal with on heavy rail. Most notably, they don't tend to have curved platforms. But we put a lot of effort into what can we do to tighten up the gap between the train and the platform. And again, I'll show you in a few slides' time what we've actually been able to do. What it's done is it's given us a huge step change in terms of accessibility. And we believe that of the heavy rail networks around the country, we are definitely going to be at the top of the tree in terms of accessibility. Improved reliability. Well, who wants to buy a train that just about matches the performance of something that actually performs quite well but is 40 years old? We're looking for a step change upwards. That still lies ahead of us. We've got to get the trains into service and get our rolling stock manufacturer to stand by what's in the contract. Reduction in operation and maintenance costs. This is interesting. Part of generating the business case, we were looking for reduction in the maintenance. We explored contracting out the maintenance, and ultimately we selected contracted out maintenance because we think it gives us the best combination of quality and value for money. So that's become the reality of what's happening on our railway. Previously, maintenance was always done in-house within the operator. Even though we're reducing journey time and carrying more passengers, it might feel rather counterintuitive. We also have demonstrated through testing and some smart design, we can take 20% out of our electricity consumption. So our green credentials also improve and that's basically just a combination of various elements of smart engineering. Also, it's fair to say that our old trains weren't even though they were electric, they weren't the most sophisticated beast. They're not very energy efficient, but we've got something here that I think now is state of the art, and we're going to be able to deliver a significant operational saving in terms of EC for T, and our carbon footprint will reduce accordingly. It's a big investment. You invest half a billion quid. You want a return on your buck. The analysis we've had done, actually I was rereading it again yesterday, £70 million a year boost for the city region economy, creation of 1,000 jobs is the other part of that. So that got a lot of political investment and interest into the project, which was great. And then this is another product of devolution. We took a view as to the various rolling stock ownership models that we could look at. We've had a very good business relationship with Angel Trains, who own the current fleet. We've had that relationship now for over 20 years. We explored that. We talked to the other people who lease rolling stock. I think everyone knows who they all are. We spoke to just about all of them. And then we looked at the alternative of why don't we own our own fleet and lease it to our own operator. And that ultimately was the decision that we took, which was a financially driven decision. Very interestingly, it chimed politically very well. I'm sure you can all imagine what colour rosettes most of the leaders of the councils around this part of the world wear. It's distinctly red, and that played very well to the political audience. But that wasn't actually the reason for doing it. It was a genuine, financially driven business decision. But there are, of course, consequences of that. It means we've got to become an asset owner for rolling stock. Okay, a little bit about the structure of the programme. It's not just about trains. I think most of you who have ever worked on rolling stock introduction realise these are pretty multidisciplinary. So broadly, there's work on platforms and track. There's signalling work, power work, work on depot reconstruction. There's a wireless connectivity project, which actually Dimitris has been our project manager for, which is progressing very nicely. There's changed the way in which the railway operates. This is the biggest change in what's happened to the way Merseyrail's world operates since the 1970s. Changes in maintenance, and then there's the asset ownership angle by us choosing that we're not going to work with a Roscoe, we're going to do that role ourselves. The approach we adopted, I wanted to bring the best from all the organisations. So we've got a set of key partners, and I basically wanted to make sure, get people to use their skills, be able to deploy them, be able to work together as integrated a team as we can make it. I guess the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but on the whole, I think we've been pretty successful. So of the various items of work up above, we bundled together rolling stock, the depot modernisation and the maintenance, and those were procured as a package. We had a very strong competition, five bidders. Ultimately, Stadler ended up as our chosen bidder, but they faced some very stiff competition from some other very good, well-known organisations. The infrastructure works, platform, track, signalling and power, that the asset is owned by Network Rail and the project delivery is being undertaken by Network Rail and their contractors. Wireless connectivity, we did this as a separate procurement. The successful bidder was Panasonic, but actually the work is being done by AD Comms, and it's in the public domain now. AD Comms actually have recently been sold by Panasonic.
So previously they were the subsidiary of Panasonic.
That's right. They were previously a wholly owned subsidiary. They're now not a wholly owned subsidiary. So we've got to quite work out. We'll work out quite what we're going to do with that, with the contractual arrangements. But work continues at pace. Governance frameworks and communication channels. These are key to successful delivery of any multidisciplinary program like this. We put a lot of effort into setting these up. They're bespoke. They're specific to this project. On the whole, I would say they work. Communication is key. Those 4 organisations, broadly, everybody knows where everybody else is. And to me, that's key to enabling people to work collaboratively. I've really enjoyed, there've been items where, there've been aspects where I've seen 2 of our partners helping each other in their delivery without needing to be prompted by us. That's been a real pleasure to watch that happen. We've also thought very much from a long-term perspective. We're not limited. We're here effectively on a permanent basis. We're a public sector body, as are our friends at Network Rail. Generally, our decision-making, we've looked at the whole life of the assets. So for typically, most of my business models have got 35 years worth of operational life, which is the design life of the rolling stock baked into them. We're not limited in our decision-making by the length of the franchise, or in our case, actually, it's a concession model. A lot of local political intervention, and we have a Metro Mayor here, so it's a guy called Steve Rotherham, who some of you might well be aware of. His counterpart down in London is Sadiq Khan. We have Andy Burnham over in Manchester. Steve is very involved in this. He's well tuned into the decision making, and knows what we're doing. He doesn't actually need to make a great deal of decisions because largely we've done most of it for it. And when we got the go ahead, the project largely is exactly the same as it was. So that's been good, but we're keeping our political leadership in step with what we're doing is an important part of it. And that also extends into the various local authorities that we have around here. So it's very much locally driven, but it's in financial terms, it's the biggest program of works that we're undertaking in the city region. And I would say it's a really good example of devolution in action. Right, you're going to want to see a train. There we are. That is 777003. So we got to pick our class number. I was quite pleased, and one of my colleagues went down and decided that 777 suited us. We knew we were going to start with the 7, so there we are, 777. We like it. 003 was the first one that was actually delivered. This was back in January of last year. We were all ready to get on with testing. We're still doing it. We all know what happened about 2 months after this thing was delivered. We had the pandemic. It's been really, really, really challenging. But what we have here is a bespoke piece of rolling stock. So this isn't a yellow version of what Stadler have sold to Anglia. In fact, there's only one common component between our train and the Anglia one, and that's the coat hook. So I actually had a look around one of the Anglia trains in Stadler's factory and decided that they had a nicer coat hook than us, and said, could we swap them, and I'll have one of those. And Stadler said, absolutely, sir, please be our guest. You can have that, and it's for free. Thank you, very nice. So this is this is a train that's been designed from a blank sheet of paper specifically for our network. It's also worth pointing out, some people who follow the world of metros, Tyne and Wear Metro, our friends up in the northeast, have also gone with Stadler, and because their train is yellow and black, and Stadler have stuck the same visual treatment of an M on the front of the Tyne and Wear train. Lots of people think that the Tyne and Wear have bought our train. They haven't. They are completely different trains. They're actually being designed in the same office as each other by 2 teams who sit alongside each other, but actually they are completely different. If you had a look at the 2 bogies side by side, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. They are utterly different to each other. And if the bogie's different, the rest of the train is different. So this was a great opportunity. We did our own procurement. It was really interesting. We had people bidding platform type products where basically you have a level of configuration that you can undertake specific to a customer. Basically, a lot of what you get is pre-engineered, predetermined. There are great strengths in that approach, and some of the rolling stock manufacturers are really experts in this. Stadler tend to sit at the other end of the spectrum where they're quite prepared to design something based around your specification. They took that approach for us, and it secured them the contract. And it's been a really engaging and exciting process, participating in train design from a blank sheet of paper. And I'm afraid I am a rolling stock designer. If you go back 30 years in my career, that's what I used to do. So it's been great fun getting involved in all that again. Okay, a little bit about the interior. We spent a huge amount of time working with our colleagues at Transport Focus, who have a very good research unit who we commissioned to help us determine what our passengers wanted. It basically enabled me to be good to what I said in my interview. So the first phase of that work took place in 2013-14, when we were still developing the specification for the train. A lot of interviews, both quantitative and qualitative, with Merseyrail passengers, really informative, a wealth of knowledge. And straight away, I started to see that we need to change the specification. I've been writing a rather generic specification, and suddenly we were seeing real themes of what people wanted, what they liked about the existing trains, and most importantly, what they didn't like. So it gave us a great way of designing out, before we'd even gone to procurement, a lot of what were perceived as problems at that stage. We then took a second stage of work, which is once we'd appointed our rolling stock manufacturer, and we were into the design process. So the design process lasted around just under 18 months. And we had a panel, we had a different approach. We had a panel of 40 passengers who basically went on the journey with us, and we spent a long time consulting with them using online tools, workshops where we all got together in a room. That would have been fun with masks on and social restrictions. But anyway, luckily we weren't in that world when we were doing it. We were able to work together. We were using virtual reality, which actually really worked. I've gone from being very skeptical about that to being actually quite an ardent fan, because it's advanced enough now that you can actually make meaningful decisions. And there are a whole host of features in here, like seat design, the width of the aisle, the width of the seats, the use of the through gangways, layout of grab poles, all sorts of features of the train. We went on a journey with our passengers, and they really helped to shape the decisions. And very much we feel that we've got a piece of rolling stock here that's very well tuned into the needs of our network. And actually it is interesting. You look at it and you compare it with a fleet like, say, the overground fleet, which again, I think serves the needs of the overground extremely well. And I used to live in Peckham, so I know that railway. You know, it's a blooming busy railway. Ours is somewhat different, but it responds well. We've got a much higher density of seating than you would see on something like an overground train. There was a very strong desire to retain 2+2 seating rather than go back to 2+3. You get lots of 2+3 seating in this part of the world, and our original trains used to be 2+3. Please don't go back there. I mean, what I really like about this, we've ended up with, it's a bespoke design of train. We developed a bespoke gauge. We pushed the train to fill the gauge, and then we wanted to push the interior walls into the body shell as far as we could to create as much space inside the train as possible. British trains are relatively small compared to their counterparts on the continent. This still looks and feels like a British train on the outside, albeit with some slightly unusual features, but on the inside, it's very different. All of our seats are 450 millimeters wide, which is the width of a priority seat. So we decided, let's give everybody a priority width seat. And we've still got an aisle that is 800 millimeters wide all the way through. So two adults can get past each other pretty comfortably. You can store buggies, you can store luggage in the aisle if you need to, and people can still circulate. You can even get a wheelchair the whole length of the train now. So it's a very different to what we've currently got. Current trains have got really cramped aisles. They've got nice, comfortable seats, generous, passengers like that. The feedback we got initially was standing passengers basically hated the current trains because there's nothing to hang on to. You can't move around, and everybody basically doesn't want to move away from the doors. So door blocking is absolutely endemic on our railway. And when you get people turn up with a bike and behave like that, then it's all good fun. Try to design all of those sources of conflict out. And if any of you are interested, the unit is making its first public outing next week. If any of you are at Rail Live, you can actually come along and see us. In fact, you can come along if you want to. You can come and say hello to me because I'm going to be there as well. So there's a Staddle stand, and the unit is making its first public outing. So you'd all be extremely welcome. Come along and I'll show you around. Okay, Kirkdale Depot. This is just north of the city centre of Liverpool. It was originally a stabling location with a wheel lathe, which is a bit strange, but okay, that's what it was. We've completely modernised it. We finished it now. This is our new maintenance hub for the new fleet. We've got our first ever driving cab simulator, which we're very excited about. I know they're not that novel. I've worked with them on other railways before, but we've actually got a really good one from Stadler and Corris, their supplier. That railway, the workshop you're seeing there on the top right, that's totally new. It's really nicely configured to work with our trains. It's an open access depot, so other rolling stock could go in there. But generally, we get very, very little other rolling stock using our depots because generally they don't operate on our infrastructure. But it's been great having a facility designed in parallel with the train so that we've got the maintenance hopefully will prove to be easy for Stadler to undertake because they designed the train and the depot in order to be able to deliver the maintenance. And at the moment, actually Stadler have got their UK headquarters in the building, but they're having to move out. We think they're going to stay in Liverpool, which is great, but they've got to move out actually because they've got to move the workforce in there. They've all been camping in their offices for a little while, a few years actually. Okay, here we are. Here's inside the shed. This is us doing one of our final tests, proving that you can get an air conditioning unit on the crane into place and replace them. It worked with about 10 centimetres to spare. It was a bit cosy at one point. But that's all fine. And this is our driving cab simulator. So we're very pleased. Our drivers see this as a great boon. Okay, platform train interface. I talked about our fatal accident a while ago. This got me thinking. It then came out in our passenger research. The number one concern that came out from passengers was platform train interface. Big gaps at certain stations. People knew about the accident that happened. There had been other instances. I know it happens on other railways. And big steps and very, very variable stepping distance, particularly in a vertical dimension. We don't have generally big horizontal steps, but we have big vertical variants. And it's predominantly, we all know, the rolling stock. It ain't the train that's different. The platforms are all different. So we took a view about it. I took my approach from various tramways where a tramway, typically they deliver unassisted access, and the key dimensions in the world of trams are that you look for a horizontal gap of no more than 75 millimetres and a vertical gap of no more than 50 millimetres. And most tramways in this country do considerably better than that. Certainly the ones I've worked on do. And I thought, can we actually bring that approach onto heavy rail? We've got old infrastructure. We've got nearly half of our platforms on a curve, which tramways generally they build their infrastructure new, or most of the ones in this country do, and they build straight platforms in order to make the platform train interface work very well. We were able to bring a variety of elements together. So this was working in partnership with our friends from Network Rail. We identified where we had platforms that did not basically conform with Network Rail standards. So a key strategic decision was, can we get all of the platforms to match Network Rail standard, which applies if they were new builds? So the key dimensions there, 915 millimetres above top of rail in the vertical sense, and on a straight track you have a horizontal offset of 730 millimetres. That varies when you're on curves. Took a view, 98 platforms needed to be rebuilt to do that. Through the procurement process, the illustration you have on the left here was from Stadler's bid. And we'd encouraged people to think about accessibility. We didn't specify the floor height of the vehicles very deliberately because I wanted to see what we could get. And this was a feature that really caught our eye from Stadler's bid. So if that's a 915 millimetre high platform, the floor height of the train at every single passenger doorway is 960 millimetres. And then the bit that clinched the deal was the sliding step that comes out from underneath the doorway. So this is at 930 millimetres above top of rail. So there's a slight, you've got two slight steps as you're negotiating that. But the bit that really did it was that's an intelligent sliding step, and the intelligence is basically ultrasonic sensing. It detects the platform and it will stop automatically 35 millimetres from the platform. So your horizontal gap is always 35 millimetres everywhere across the whole network. put all of those ingredients together, put some nice door safety features in, such as the illuminated portal that we've got around there, which is flashes red. It's like the hustle alarm, but a visual version of the hustle alarm. We've got sensitive door edges, like on Victoria Line, for example. And we've developed a strategy where we wanted to deliver the same interface, every doorway, every platform, every passenger. It's not just the wheelchair doors, it's for everybody. We got political buy-in big time for this. The vision that we developed with our political leaders, it was a really nice collaborative piece of work with them. And I said, look, you're gonna have to put your hands in your pockets to deliver this. It ain't gonna come cheap, and it doesn't. But our view is it's there then forever. And Network Rail, we put arrangements in place so that Network Rail will now be maintaining, so that the infrastructure remains consistent with this strategy. We're really excited about this. We think we're the only, well, we know that we're the only railway at the moment on the UK mainline who's adopted this approach. Anglia, people might have seen the Stadler stop that operates on Greater Anglia. Great, they've got basically the vehicle side of the solution, and it works very, very well on much of the network, but they haven't made the infrastructure interventions that we've done. So in some locations, you don't quite get it in the same way that we're going to be able to deliver it. And I know that causes some frustration for some of the wheelchair users, because they don't know that they want to be able to plan both ends of their journey. On our network, they're going to be able to do that with confidence, because they're going to know it's the same no matter where. And in fact, you don't even need to get off at the door by the wheelchair space. You could roll down the train and get off at another door if you felt like it. Not sure they will. But. Okay, a little bit just to prove that we did actually do a lot of work. There was a thick end of a year's worth. We had a rolling blockade worked its way across the whole end of our network, and we went from an awful lot of this, an awful lot of horizontal, vertical steps of 400 to 500 millimeters. We ended up with lots of platforms that look pretty much like this. We did a very extensive rollout of tactile. We're not fully tactile as a railway yet, but we are not a million miles off. I was delighted every time we touched a platform, put the tactiles in, so that was good. And our conclusion is we think there's going to be a huge benefit to our railway and our passengers once we get new units into service. We're not in passenger service yet, so this benefit hasn't yet been delivered. Systems engineering approach, funding was required, political determination, but all of those fell into place because people got the vision. 3 key benefits: safety. We believe this addresses the fundamental weaknesses that our railway experienced. We think the likelihood of people's experiencing
that the
accidents.
building will be closing in 15 minutes.
Don't worry, we're fine. They know we're here,
Dimitris. The premises within this period.
Apologies, we'll get a couple more announcements in the next 15 minutes, but don't worry, we're locked in, and I can get us out.
We're staying overnight.
We're staying here until we're finished. Accessibility, and then there's a real, for our operator, we think there's going to be a real dwell time benefit. The need to deploy wheelchair ramps, we think, will completely disappear. We also think, just for general passengers, people struggling with the platform train interface, it's going to be very, very easy for passengers to get on and off. I know from my experience on tramways that this works, and you're able to deliver good, reliable dwell time, which is key to a metro-style operation like ours. As I've said, it'll be there for everybody. And just for the wider industry, I don't want to sound too messianical about it, but this could be adopted on a much wider scale. And I know that one of the comments I receive quite often is, well, you can do that because there's only one type of rolling stock on your network. And that would be true if we had adopted a height and offset different to Network Rail standard. But this could be done on any railway. And if you live with the Network Rail standard, nothing should hit a Network Rail standard platform, or the gauging engineers aren't doing their jobs properly. And then as you introduce rolling stock that's got the lower floor and the sliding step, you'll deliver the benefits that we're able to. So if anyone's interested, please come and talk to me about it. I am actually quite passionate about this. And this photo for me says it all. This is Hamilton Square. This is a heavily curved platform. This is well under 200 meters radius, this platform. One of our units, you can see actually as well as that, so you can see the sliding step is here. You've got your illuminated portal. You get exactly that platform train interface everywhere, no matter what the curvature. It's actually on a spiral curve, this platform. And we've also, this is part of the gauge. we in developing our bespoke gauge, we also wanted to widen the vehicle out at just above platform level. We had in mind something more slab-sided, like say the old D stock that used to run around on the underground. But Stadler came up with something that's quite a sort of conventional British style of body, but with this triangular sort of insert the whole of the length of the body side on the doors. So as they're triangular and Swiss, they've been nicknamed Toblerones, and I'm afraid that name has stuck. So we've got Toblerones on our trains. Hope you all agree. I think that's a really compelling image, and it is quite different to what we had before. Okay, let's move on to other infrastructure interventions. This is one of the challenges that, again, we're in the process of working through with our friends at Network Rail. We've bought new trains. We're trying to carry more passengers. We're making much better use of the space inside. Also, the trains are a little bit longer, so they're roughly each unit is 65 metres long, whereas the old ones were just under 61 metres long. We run them in double, so we've got 130 metre long trains as opposed to 121 metre long trains. We've got variety of bits of infrastructure with varying levels of compliance with the modern standards that would be applicable if we were building new infrastructure. And a particular feature is that quite a lot of the signals are sited really close to the end of platforms. And with a longer train, getting signal sighting in place is quite challenging. But we've worked very closely with the operator and our friends at Network Rail to deliver a package of works, which we're just working our way through Grit 4 and into Grit 5 at the moment. We're not out on site yet building these, but basically we've got quite a lot of infrastructure works. There are quite a few platforms which need a bit of lengthening. There are a few signals which need moving. There's a significant bit of track reconfiguration, which is at the busiest part of our network. Liverpool Central is our busiest station. It's one of the busiest stations outside London in the UK. And we've got a reversing siding in there, and basically the train doesn't fit in the reversing siding, so we've got to redo the track work down there. Quite looking forward to doing that. That's in the future, but the design looks good. We're underway. Network Rail have got their contractors in place, and we're ready to hit site towards the end of the summer, into the autumn and through 2022. So we'll get all that in place before we have the full fleet introduced. Right, another element of this, you might remember I talked about journey time reductions. I do like a metro railway and a tram, all about acceleration braking, that type of rolling stock. We wanted to deliver the journey time reductions, and key to that was buying a train that is significantly more powerful than the one that it replaced. So we've got a train that's basically got 2.1 megawatts of installed power. The existing trains are just under 700 kilowatts. So this thing is a bit of a beast. If you look at power to weight ratios and all that sort of stuff, and go all top gear on it, it's right up there. And largely, I based the specification from a traction package perspective on a Far Eastern metro train. That's what we simulated, and we recognised if we're going to do this, the power supply up here has historically been one of the weaker parts of the railway. So we probably had to do something anyway. But we recognised, look, if we're going to try and deliver this benefit, we're going to have to spend money on the power infrastructure. So we've developed with Network Rail a programme of work which is now well over 90% complete. We're boosting the power infrastructure. We're putting 3 new bulk supply points, and at the moment we've got the railway fed with sort of 2.5 bulk supply points. We're making our poor little electrons run a very, very long way around the network to do their job and get into the traction motors. Significant losses. We get low voltage. Low voltage is a bit of a feature of some parts of our network. So we're increasing our connectivity to Scottish Power to help address that. 10 new substations are going in, and there are a couple of examples there, including a very nice green one. That was in Cheshire. The planners decided that they wanted a green substation from us. So what the planners say, the planners get. They got a green substation. Lots and lots of copper going down. And something I have to say that is a real feature of this project. We took a view 15 months ago when COVID and all the restrictions hit. What do? We saw that a lot of the construction industry was basically down in tools. And together with Network Rail, we decided to take the diametrically opposite view, which is how can we continue to deliver this programme of works? We're well into it, we're fully mobilised, the contractor's there. And I have to say, hats off, we reworked how we actually behave on site. Safety was protected. We haven't had a spate of COVID cases associated with this project. We've continued, every site remained open, every major milestone was hit over the course of the COVID lockdowns, and hopefully that will continue. So well done to Network Rail for that. And we're approaching the end of what I hope we'll look back on as a pretty successful project. So that's good. Now we're into Dimitris's world, wireless connectivity. This was another one. Again, a feature of devolved authority. It's up to us. What do we want to do? The journey here started, I bet you some of you go to the IMEC lunch, and you know that everybody sits around at the IMEC lunch placing bets on how long people are going to talk for in their speeches. One of them, and then nobody listens to what the speeches are. Of course, maybe that's just the tables I get invited to sit at, I don't know. One of them, I was sitting with one of my colleagues, and the speaker grabbed us instantly. It was the head of engineering for British Airways. And the chap described the journey that BA went on, moving from the 1970s type fleets that they had, 747s, which was the example he was using, going through to the 777s in the 1990s. And he started to describe the level of telematics and level of communication, ship-to-shore communication was how he was describing it. And then he was describing the beginning of the Dreamliner coming into the British Airways fleet. And he said, we're just in completely different worlds in terms of the quality of information that we're able to access about our asset while it's flying around. And it really got us thinking, how could we do something equivalent on our railway? Because we've got our equivalent of a 747, the class 507, 508. It's an electromechanical machine. It ain't got a lot of microprocessing power on board it. It's basically a machine. And we've moved into the 21st century where the majority of the systems on board the new train are microprocessor controlled. What can we do with all of that? So it really got us thinking, what would be useful? We'd also been thinking about, can we make a business case for providing passengers with Wi-Fi? Because of course, all the passengers told us they expect free Wi-Fi. Well, of course they do. We couldn't make a business case for that because we couldn't see a way of getting a revenue back. All we saw was a great way of pouring a lot of public money into giving people free Wi-Fi on trains. I'm not sure that's quite what local government bodies like ours are there to do. So we looked at what can we do with all the technology that's on board the train and how can we make best use of it, and would providing wireless connectivity enable us to do that? So the sort of thing we were looking at was getting the
Attention please.
Sorry.
Attention please. The building will be closed and secured in 5 minutes from now. The building will be closed and secured in 5 minutes from now.
That's your reminder.
That's telling me I better hurry up and finish the presentation.
Concierge desk on 330-1111 immediately.
There you are.
Thank you.
You now all know our switchboard number because the PA's just told you. A real big one was CCTV. We've got lots of CCTV on board the new train, real nice high quality stuff. We're actually showing the images inside the saloon. That's one of the things the passengers suggested to us. But we thought, could we get those images into our control room? We have it's almost like a prototype of an integrated control centre. It's a location called Sand Hills, just north of the city centre. We've benefited from that since the 1990s on our network. And when we said to the guys in control, what would your view be if we could get CCTV in real time in here? You can do that? Well, maybe we can. Getting voice data communication so that we can communicate between the saloon of the train and the control room while we're actually managing incidents. So what we were trying to do is empower the control room. We still want the driver of the train empowered, but the driver of the train has got a job to do. Why don't we take the pressure off and get the control room so that they can much more directly understand what's going on and participate in managing operational incidents? We then expanded it out to include the British Transport Police. So I think we're going to be the first railway where the BTP are going to have a live feed from our train into their control room it's at Victoria, isn't it?
Avebury Bridge.
Yeah. Also, so our viewers, there are lots of the onboard systems. There's onboard telematics. We've got passenger counting on board every train. What a useful, powerful piece of information, knowing how many passengers we've got on board every train at every time is. Adjust the passenger information, dealing with security and emergencies, enabling our staff to remain connected and in touch with what's going on. Train diagnostics, infrastructure monitoring, and I think we've only just scratched the surface. With Dimitris yesterday, we were looking at a variety of other opportunities of what we could do. So effectively, what we're providing is 100 megabits per second of connectivity to each train everywhere across the network. That's our basic output that we determined. By the way, when we're not using it for doing all these things that have an operational benefit, we'll let the passengers use it for free. So the passengers get their free Wi-Fi as the spin-off benefit of this. So how's it being delivered? We ran a separate competition for this, really, really interesting. It's still, I'd say, it's a fascinating market, but still relatively immature. There are lots of companies who are involved and want to become involved. Maybe quite a few of you are sitting in on the call, but we had a very diverse range of participants and bids that we received. But Panasonic, which is Alan Dick Communications, secured the contract, and it's a trackside Wi-Fi solution. So we've got all of our surveys done. The design is practically complete. We've done our prototyping and the in-lab testing. That was completed quite a while ago. We've got our first installations on train, and we're just in the process of commissioning those. That's looking close to coming live. Main construction now is well underway, and our rollout is route by route. We'll be rolling this out in advance of launching our passenger service over the course of this year. So another really interesting project. Here's another one. I am going to have to hurry up. This is the underside of one of the Class 777s. So I mentioned before about going beyond the network. IPMU, we watched with great interest. The trial was undertaken down on Anglia. Network Rail were in the lead for that. They fitted out a Bombardier Electrostar with about 8 tons worth of batteries. I remember having a bit of fun at Litchurch Lane, having a look at that. And the idea resonated. So we held that, we put it into our specification. And we've just been through a trial with Standard. So we've had one of our units fitted. So that gap on one of our units is full of a traction converter, cooling equipment, and the batteries. And I can tell you, I need to actually present the business case to the board tomorrow, so I can't say too much. But I'll tell you this: it works. Also, it managed without any great difficulty to go 20 miles all on its own. It actually did it on our network where the third rail was still there, but the shoes were up in the air. And that was it. That was very much in line with the simulated expectations. So we're pleased. We've got a really interesting tool that potentially could expand the range of our network. I'm trying to remember what's on my next slide. So where are we up to? Trial to prove technical capability and financial viability. Technical capability, broadly, I'm going to say tick in the box. It works. Financial viability, that's what I'm presenting to the board tomorrow. So I'm afraid I can't steal their thunder and tell you quite what that is, but it's a very interesting piece of work that I've been doing on all day. We've got a concept of a production version of it. It's a prototype, what we've got on our hands at the moment, but we know now basically what the configuration would be. It's actually significantly, almost double the capacity of the prototype. Modular design, mounted on the end cards, which is where we've got a bit of space, and it's all about managing axle load, actually. And we can install up to 320 kilowatt hours of energy onto the vehicle, which we think will give us a pretty chunky range. Limiting factor, axle weight. It's about protecting Network Rail structures. So the key number is 16.5 tons of axle weight. Interestingly, our train is designed to be converted to dual voltage. So we've got a pantograph well built into the roof, and we could fill that space up with all the equipment needed to become a dual voltage 750 volt 25 kV AC equipment. So there'd be a transformer, a rectifier, and the other traction equipment could go into that space. The pantograph well's free future. We could even contemplate having DC overhead. There is DC overhead on Network Rail. It just happens to be part of Manchester Metrolink and Tyne-and-Wear Metro. So it's not completely alien, it's just rather unusual. Expected practical range between charges of at least 20 miles. Yeah, we can do that. But on some of our longer routes that we're contemplating, we might want to put some charging infrastructure in just to support us. Typically, maybe at a longer route. So if some of the routes we're looking at might be 20 miles long, typically we'd put a charging station at the end. One of the routes, definitely we'd have to put something in the middle. The key is proving battery life. Again, I won't steal my own thunder because I've got to tell my board first, but I'm quite looking forward to tomorrow. Also, as well as being able to give you this extended range, it means that you can regenerate braking energy. Right at the moment, we've just converted our network to regen with the new fleet. That was part of the power supply project, and the new trains regen, whereas the old trains, it was all rheostatic braking. Everything's in the atmosphere. This means that basically every time we brake, the battery will be receptive to some degree. We will be able to store what we think is quite a chunky proportion of our braking energy and then reuse it when we take off again. So it's great on a metro type network like ours. We're exploring different methods of charging. Can we work with overhead electrical infrastructure or third rail? Again, really interesting. And we've got an expansion. This is what I'm presenting tomorrow. Headbolt Lane is a place that doesn't have a station at the moment, but it will do within the next couple of years. It's just beyond Kirby, which is on the eastern fringe of our network. It's a short extension of the Merseyrail network. And at the moment, we're going through with Network Rail, determining whether this is best delivered using battery train or trying to extend the third rail. And that's what I'll be doing tomorrow, is presenting the conclusions of that. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you the answer yet, because my board might completely disagree with me. Okay, timeline. Won't dwell too much because, yeah, I'm slightly over time. Developing the business case. There was a huge amount of planning in this. That might sound like an awfully long time. Actually, we were amazingly busy. But this is where the devolution came in, I think. This is where we were starting to make the decisions, the strategic decisions that make this project stand apart from our peers who are doing this similar work elsewhere in the country. And getting the stakeholder buy-in and support for what we were doing is a huge part of that. The procurement phase kicked off in earnest. Actually, it kicked off at the very end of 2015, and we got from ODU notice to contract award in 14 months, which was pretty good going for a public sector body. I was pleased with that. Stadler, as you've seen, now we've got train designed. Contract award was in February 2017. We undertook a 2P transfer. There were thick end of 150 Merseyrail employees transferred across to Stadler roughly 6 months after the contract award. They've been working for Stadler ever since, and I have to say the performance of the fleet, it was good under Merseyrail. It's now a little bit better under Stadler, so that bodes well for our future, we hope. As I said, just under 18 months or so to get our train design complete, which from a blank sheet of paper and a vision presented in a bid document, I thought was pretty good. So hats off to our friends at Stadler and our colleagues for going through that process. And it really was, every aspect of the train was designed. First rolling stock arrived. I showed you the photo back at the beginning of the presentation. That was January 2020. And then we all know what happened 2 months later. And I'm afraid we've had a real grind. The thing that's really scuppered us, Stadler are quite multinational and their supply chain is quite multinational. A bespoke train needs a lot of testing, and testing engineers in just about any discipline. Rolling stock's no different, it's quite specialised, and most of them were located in other countries. The travel restrictions that existed between our country and other places, it kept swirling around, and trying to get testing engineers into the country to actually undertake the tests was more of a challenge than the testing itself, to be honest with you. The testing, once we got it going, generally, train works pretty well. The things need to be corrected, like always. But we've gone at a much slower pace than than I had planned. But nonetheless, we are just about there. There are now very few of our tests left to undertake, and we're getting ready to do our mileage accumulation in advance of Stadler presenting to me for acceptance of the units. In parallel, our infrastructure work kicked off out on site. We've done all of our platform height and offset work. Power supply is nearly finished, and then we've got our work for train lengthening that's going to run on into next year. And our introduction into service is looking like it's going to be in, we hope, the early part of next year. So the key lessons for me, 2 of them. I think the devolved decision making, I think it can work if it's managed effectively. I think it's put us in really good stead for this project, and hopefully you've got a feel for some of that from what I've been able to explain. And just a word to the wise, please avoid pandemics if you possibly can. But I guess there are very many people in the audience who are thinking exactly the same thing. It really did scupper a lot of the best laid plans of Mice and Men. Nonetheless, we kept going. We've delivered a lot. But the key thing of getting the trains tested took a lot longer than we hoped. Right, I've got a glass of water waiting, and we're on to the final slide and questions.
Excellent.
So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, David, for the presentation. I hope our audience has found it very interesting. I would have to say that David has a love-hate relationship with force majeure. But as you can see, we're getting through things, which is great.
Should I stop sharing so that I can actually I've got a chance of seeing what's going on?
We can do that.
I can bring it back up if it helps answer any of the questions.
So we have my colleague Christodoulou will help us with a Q&A session. Thank you, Zen, for stepping in. Would you like to pick up the first question, please?
Yeah, so we have quite a few interesting questions, and a shout out from Howard for me. I have responded. Hi, Howard. And right, so first one that struck me is the one about why do we now have trains with black ends? Seems odd to make the train with low visibility, especially when the train is yellow.
Really good question. Okay, yes, we're all used to, since the days of British Rail, trains had yellow ends. The standards around this changed a few years ago. The key feature of the end of a train, the reason for the yellow end was to enable trackside workers to be able to identify that there's a train coming. It's to make it visible to protect people's safety. The feature now that that provides that actually is the triangle of headlights. So you've got your two headlights either side and your cyclops light up at the front. So that's what delivers it. And you'll see quite a few of the other fleets around the country are also delivering trains with non-yellow ends. But that's what track workers are now trained to look for. It is interesting, actually. It's funny because Merseytravel's our colour scheme is yellow, black, and silver. So yes, you could have justified making the train at the end of the train yellow. Stadler put forward that design. It was one we consulted with our passengers on, actually. And actually, we do there is still the old standard of how much yellow is on the end of a train. We actually still meet it, but not in the way in which you normally would. Certainly not by painting the whole end of the train yellow. Quite a few other trains used to paint a rectangle. We've actually got two of the yellow colour that runs down the side of the train actually wraps around the end, and we've got two long, thin yellow stripes down either side of the train. And actually, there's a square meterage of yellow which would enable us there to pass the old standard anyway. So actually, it has got enough yellow on the end, but actually the focus is on the headlights.
There's one question here I just picked up. It says, how much training was or is been completed on the simulator? And is there, I missed the question. Is there any live training before introduction? And that's a question from Ian.
Okay, right. The training is all planned. All of the trainers are fully trained and fully conversant with the tool, and actually able to reprogram it and do all sorts of rather clever things. In terms of actual drivers, not yet. We've got to get through the milestone of accepting rolling stock and having enough of our rolling stock accepted so that it's worth starting the training. We don't want to train drivers and then have them effectively have their competence timed out because we haven't yet got enough rolling stock accepted. So most of the driver training program lies ahead of us. I think that's the first part of the question. Did I answer the second part? So I'm just trying to find the question.
The question has now moved to the answer.
Oh, it's moved in the answer. Okay.
The second part was, is there any live training before introduction?
Yes, there is. So it's a blend of using the simulator, and then once so for most of our drivers, they're route familiar. But it's a traction conversion course, and these trains are very, very different. They'll spend a lot of their time on the simulator, but then the final few days of their training course, they'll be out on the network.
So there's a question related here, David, which I suppose you've already answered, about whether you still need drivers. So you said you're training them, so you must need them. Has there been any consideration about benefits of ATO?
Okay, really good question. So firstly, let's just talk about drivers. Yes, we do need drivers. It was a sort of very, very strategic question right back at the beginning, is could we make Merseyrail a driverless network? And pretty quickly I worked out that we had 27 level crossings. And I thought the idea of a driverless train and a level crossing leaves me feeling slightly terrified. So I don't think that really works, to be honest with you. So we quickly took the view that trying to go to driverless is not the right answer. Just bear with me. Who asked the question? I'm just trying to find the question in my little window.
The answered section.
Oh, they go in the answer.
So it was a straight. The question was: do you still need drivers?
Do you still need drivers? Yes, we do.
Okay, so if any of you fancy a career change, you can apply, become drivers.
Be my guest.
Oh, yes. I assume the question was coming from a signaling background, whether it was related to why are you using drivers. I didn't appreciate it could be a job seeking question, of course. So have you?
Right. Yes, if you want to apply for a job, please apply to Merseyrail, not to Merseytravel. They're the operator. We're sort of becoming a strange amalgam between a Roscoe and what would be the DFT in most other for most other TOCs. There's a strange combination to consider, but there you are. That's what I'm becoming.
And that's the difference between Merseytravel and Merseyrail.
We're the public authority. You know, there's a handful of people here. Merseyrail employ over 1,000. They're the TOC, but we're their customer.
So David, one of the questions here is about energy consumption of the new fleet and whether it's considered to support the UK decarbonisation plans.
That's a good question. So the answer specifically is, well, actually, we're looking at it in the context of the ambitions we have across the city region for decarbonisation. Where we're hoping that we can do better than the target that the UK has set for itself. So it features within that, and then I guess obviously Liverpool City Region is part of the UK. So yes, it would feature. I think I've been trying to work out if any clever people here can work out how you measure the relative energy efficiency of different fleets of trains. I spent a long time turning my head inside out trying to do this with some complicated spreadsheet. And I even asked my friend Roger Ford from Modern Railways if he could help me, because I know he's good at this sort of stuff. And that didn't work either. I still can't work out how we compare the relative energy efficiency of different fleets of trains. But obviously, a lot of it is down to the duty cycle. You know, is it reasonable to compare a high-speed train travelling at 300 kilometres an hour with our trains, which don't go above 120 kilometres an hour? But yes, I guess it could feature, and there are some features of what we've done which might be useful to others elsewhere in the country in delivering their part of the equation.
And sticking with the energy and the traction supply theme, there's a question about harmonic filtration. Has it been installed at selected or most BSPs? Not quite sure what a BSP is, a feeder station, supply station. And now your supply is taken at 132 kilovolt level. I
think it's a bulk supply point. And the answer to the 132 is no, we're not. We're at 11,000. That's the voltage that we're dealing with Scottish Power. What was the bit about? There was a bit about harmonics there, wasn't there?
Have you installed harmonic filtration? I'm assuming it's an issue of electromagnetic interference.
It is. To be honest with you, my answer is I know exactly what we've done on the rolling stock, which is we've actually got a really nice low electromagnetic footprint. We've been through all of the process with to satisfy Network Rail. I have to say, doing all of that work without the traction provider, ABB, who were locked down in Switzerland, able to attend. And I did notice there's somebody who either does work or used to work for ABB. Doing that by remote control and getting to a point where we were able to get through the very rigorous and quite rightly so process that Network Rail make all new fleets go through, I thought was a monumental feat of engineering. Doing that without the traction engineers actually in the UK, I thought, I didn't at the beginning, I was tearing my hair out thinking, how on earth are we actually going to do that? But it was done. At the bulk supply points, the answer I think is yes, but I would stand to be corrected. I'd have to seek the advice from some of my colleagues within Network Rail actually, but I think so.
Okay.
Going back to the energy consumption
Yeah.
point we were talking about before, and the different options to measure. The question that was asked was from the University of Liverpool. So they may have perhaps some ideas that they would like to share.
I recognise the name. The gentleman there's reached out to me on LinkedIn previously, I think. So come and see me. We're back at work, so please come and make an appointment, and we can talk about that.
Great. Next question is from Howard Williams, who's asking, I know the turning circle on the Wirral loop is very tight.
Yeah.
So the trains have to be bespoke. Are the trains on the Northern Line made to the same specification, even though there could be a standard length or longer?
Good question. The answer is the fleet is absolutely homogeneous, apart from the one that we stuck the batteries on. No, the trains are designed. We want to give our operator the flexibility, so we don't have a sub-fleet that lives on the Wirral and a sub-fleet that lives over on the Northern Line. All trains can go ever around the network. We do have really tight. Actually, our tightest curves are actually on the Northern Line. We've got so that's horizontal curves. We've got the steepest gradients in the country. We've got 1 in 27 coming out of one of our tunnels. So we do lots of tests on Leeds Street Bank. That's heading north out of the city centre. And we've got really tight vertical curves as well. But no, we've got a fleet of trains that can be deployed onto any of the routes across the whole network. And I think that was the right choice. I'm glad we specified things that way.
And there's an interesting question coming from Chris, who's asking if the facing seats that you saw in the presentation before are far enough away to stop people resting their shoes on each other. I think it's a question that lots of people have.
Keep your feet off the seats is a well-known refrain and the theme of a lot of posters on our current trains and stickers. The answer is, I guess it depends on the length of your legs. But no, we did put a great deal of thought into seat spacing. I talked in the presentation about width. We've gone for basically a wider seat than you get on most trains, marginally wider. As we were going through the specification and the design process, there was a lot of industry press coverage of some of the newer fleets, some of which operate round London, where there was some criticism levelled at the seating and lack of leg room and relatively firm seats. It was already in our thinking, but very, very deliberately, one of the bits of feedback we got from our passengers was, can we have a bit more leg room, please? One of the passengers, I love this one, they said, sitting on a Merseyrail train is like playing Tetris with your knees, which I thought was a great quote. That one stuck with me. It's great if you ask your passengers what the hell they want, because they tell you, particularly Scousers, they don't hold back. So we thought very much. We've got a mix of airline seating and facing seating. Our remit for the facing seating was that 2 95th percentile males, and I happen to be one of those, can sit opposite each other with significant separation between their knees. And that is the case. But could I put my feet on the seats opposite? Yes, I could, if I really wanted to. Similarly, we wanted people taller than 95th percentile male to be able to fit comfortably into the airline style seating. And we happen to have one of our passengers on our panel. He's a big lad. He's about 6'6", and he's all legs. So he was very much my test case. If you can get in there, just about, that you're probably not 99th percentile. You're probably 99.9th percentile. He really was a big fella. So we put a lot of thought into it. But yes, people sitting opposite could still put their feet on the seats. Crikey, I can't imagine seats now that far apart that you couldn't. There'd be an enormous gulf between the seats. We've still got to carry a lot of passengers.
Thank you, David. So Eric Bates is asking, did you consider selecting shoe gear, so top cover could be fitted to third rail like so many other metros in the world.
Yep, I'm familiar with the Ankara Metro system. I've worked on that a little bit, and I know Toronto as a passenger. I've never had the pleasure of going to San Francisco, I'm afraid. Yes, that is one of the considerations that Network Rail are giving. So in the decision-making process that we're going through for our possible extension out to Headbolt Lane, one of the features of the third rail choice that we could make is the fitting of a shroud of the nature. The one that people have been sort of kicking around and looking at is the one that's in use on Ankara Metro. Certainly within my remit, there's no consideration of any retrofitting of a shroud onto our existing third rail. I don't know if anybody down south is considering that. Obviously, there's a lot more third rail down in your part of the world than there is in ours. But no, that's not on our radar, other than possibly for our extension.
Not that I know of. That's what I was asking, whether if you were to do it for the extension, you'd have to do it for the rest of the line, and whether there was considerations about the cost and the safety benefits.
Well, that's all good fun. That begs the question, like, why is, in that case, with the Jubilee line extension, why isn't the whole of the London Underground full of platform screen doors? And by the way, I know a lot about that because I used to work for Westinghouse Brakes. I was one of the directors when we built that lot back in the 1990s. So, yeah, there is no. So it's being considered for the extension. I don't believe there's anybody presenting an argument that says if you make that choice, you would then have to retrospectively apply it to the whole of our network. Mm-hmm. And if we were to do that, I've got no idea who on earth would pay for it.
Now, I suppose you could use the same argument as London Undergrounds about the platform screen doors.
Absolutely.
So
I will move us on.
Just a question.
Just to go through a bit more questions, if we can, before we finish out. There's one, and I like this one because I can see that our audience are also interacting with each other. There's a question asked by Michael, which says, where will the Wirral line trains be maintained? Do they need to get to Kirkdale? And if so, how? There's a response from Paul that says there's a connecting line between the...
There's an interconnection line between the... So the answer is yes, they will. Most of their maintenance, they can be part, with Birkenhead North, which is our other depot, which is on the Wirral. That's still going to be a stabling location for the new fleet, and there's going to be a wash plant there. But no, the maintenance basically is at Kirkdale. But yeah, the two lines are connected. Passenger trains never use that line, but there is an interconnection line under the city centre. That's got a really tight curve on it as well.
So to pick up another question then, there's one from Carl that says, is the idea of the train only needing a driver and no guard part of the reduced operating costs in the original business case? That's
a very interesting question. Yes and no. We've had together with there were 5 operators who ended up in dispute with the RMT about the introduction of driver only or driver controlled operation. We were one of those 5. The dispute is not yet over, so I've got to be a little bit circumspect about what I say, so please forgive me on that. We do have a very open and constructive dialogue with our friends in the RMT and Merseyrail as well. We've noted with interest the developments of late on South Western Railway, where the RMT members voted quite heavily in favour of adoption of driver controlled operation, which was interesting. That's quite a change of stance. But our train is capable of being operated in either mode.
Moving on to another technical question, I think. Was the scale and cost of the infrastructure interventions properly understood when specifying the length of the trains?
Yes and no. It was to some extent. I would say it was a little bit underestimated, but broadly we had a pretty good idea of what was needed. We actually built it into the procurement in that we specified a maximum length of train. We gave our bidders a passenger carrying capacity that they had to meet. We said your train can be no more than 65 metres long. And we said if your train is longer than the existing train, so if you go beyond 61 metres, we're going to add in a level of effectively the CapEx project that we'd have to undertake with Network Rail, and that will be added onto your bid price because we would then have to spend that money. It was a really interesting dynamic in the bidding phase because we had people bidding different lengths of train. It also led to at least one of the bidders at the initial round of bidding basically trying to bid us a train for people who had minuscule legs. So we really had an issue with the seat spacing in the initial bids, and we had to get that adjusted. That bidder who made it through to the BAFO but didn't actually make didn't actually secure the contract in the end, ended up lengthening their train as the bid went on, recognising that they would be securing a financial penalty in our bid evaluation. But we basically said, I'm sorry, we can't live with a train that people taller than 6 foot are not going to be able to sit down in the airline seats. It doesn't work. So yes, we had a pretty good handle on it. Was it perfect? No.
It's always the case. Was it a risk to opt for a train that was not tested in the UK and designed abroad, rather than going for a solution which was already successful, for example, the London overground trains?
Again, a good question. And was there a risk? Yes, there's delivering big programs like this is all about managing risk. Yes, it meant there was a lot more engineering for us to do. We had to gear up ourselves to be able to manage our side of the equation. You need, as a client, you've still got a job to do, even though we're not designing the train. We've got to approve the design of the train. We knew about that, and we did have different bidders. So we had some bidders offering basically a bespoke solution, like the one that we ended up with from Stadler. Other people coming from much more of a, you know, here's a standard product that already exists. It's already homologated in the UK. That all featured in our bid evaluation. So some people, there's a sort of you could say there's a level of technical risk that you can perceive is lower. Are they able to deliver that a little bit quicker because they've already been through these processes? All of that was factored into our bid evaluation. We assessed the risk and built that into our choice of supplier, and we ended up with what we ended up with. And I still think we made an entirely appropriate choice.
There's a question from Mark. Do the trains have black box instrumentation?
Yes.
And,
I hope that's not too simple.
No,
it's a good question.
It's a good question. It's a simple answer.
this one is not a simple answer unless you have a video of it, David. How does the sliding step work when the station is on a bend?
Right, I don't have a video of it, but I'll tell you what I'll do, if you don't mind. I'll just put my screen back up and I'll go back to that photograph that I showed you in the middle of the presentation, if that's okay. Just bear with me. See if I can work out how to do this.
And while you're looking at that, there's a train connectivity question that says...
Well, I'll tell you what, can you answer that?
Are you able to deliver...
You're my project manager.
Are you able to deliver the network connectivity speeds? How does the data from the train's diagnostic system compare to the old trains? So the answer is, it's work in progress. Our simulation model says that we will. Obviously, we have to power up the infrastructure and then do our tests to prove that. But we are confident that we will deliver. And as a matter of fact, the actual technology out there, what we're installing, is capable of providing higher speed. It's a matter of license. So we factor into our design the ability to pay more for the license and then bump up the speed even higher at a later stage when we feel this is necessary. So the old trains, you know, the new trains, the diagnostic system is a Stadler diagnostic system. What the train connectivity then offers is the ability to offload the data from the train to the Stadler database throughout the route, which means that even if you're in the tunnel, you don't have to wait for the train to come out of the tunnels to pick up
And you don't have to wait for it to go back to the depot at night to download things, which is how many fleets are managed.
That's right.
And the old trains, there's very little diagnostic capability on board them. They are electromechanical machines from the 1970s. Some of the systems have got a little bit of microprocessor control on, but it's like little pockets of technology on board the train. And there's certainly no remote diagnostic capability with those. Okay, I've got the image back up. So the question was, how does the sliding step work on a curved platform? This is what it's the bit I was trying to describe about the intelligence. So each doorway, the step behaves in response to the environment that it's in. So the door will open, as you know. Sorry, the step deploys first. So the step starts to deploy, and the ultrasonic sensor at the edge is looking outwards horizontally and down. And as soon as it detects it detects the platform, and then delivers motion to stop 35 millimeters from it. So it does that at absolutely every door, irrespective of what the curvature of the platform that it's adjacent to is. So, and I have to tell you, it works an absolute treat. I've been out on many platforms. We've got, that's one of the formal tests we've got to complete, actually, is that system integration test between the infrastructure and the platform. But to be honest with you, I don't doubt that we're going to pass it, because I've seen hundreds of examples of different trains stopping at different locations and everywhere across the whole network, whether the station's curved or not. Basically, Network Rail have got our platforms into the right configuration. They're in the right place relative to the track bed now, and we're just getting an absolutely consistent PTI everywhere across the network. It's really good.
Lots of other questions.
I'm on share,
but I think we're coming close to an end. And that's not the image we would like to leave you with. Here we are. So if you would like to participate, share your thoughts or anything else related to the to today's presentation, please carry on Twitter, LinkedIn or Facebook. Find our accounts.
Can I ask Dimitris, do
Yes.
you guys want to, there's some questions here, I mean, there's some super questions which we haven't got to yet. If you guys can keep these, I'll happily do a written response that you guys could post back to the members if you wanted.
So with that, and because we're past 7:30, I would like to thank David for taking time today to stay behind and give us this excellent presentation about the work we're doing here in Liverpool. My colleague Zen for helping out with her questions and organizing the event. I think, David, you did say that the unit will make its first appearance over the next few days.
Next week at the Rail Live event, which is in Warwickshire.
And I've seen that we had quite a few people joining us from Liverpool and the Merseyside region. So if you do want to come along and talk to David, David is always happy to discuss and show people the unit. So we leave you with the view from outside the window. On a sunny day, on a sunny summer day, rather than today. We will be back with you in September. Like we said at the beginning, we hope to be at Savoy Place, but if not, we will carry on the online lectures. So thank you very much, and have a very good evening.